From what I understand, the people that were there on the scene were not 10-year homicide detectives. They didn't have a lot of experience in homicide at that point, to include the supervisor, who, from my understanding, never investigated homicide before being installed as the supervisor for the homicide unit.
You just heard the type of supervisor Sheriff Nanos allowed to oversee the case of Nancy Guthrie on the very night she was taken. And with the latest reports now hinting at a case going cold, what is the real possibility of ever finding Nancy Guthrie? Because an investigator went out to that terrain herself and came back with answers that point directly to why so many people believe this case is stalling. And every answer leads back to one person, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. There are things Sheriff Nanos does not want you to know about this investigation, and do you know why? Because the truth would hurt his pride and expose the ego that has driven decision after decision in this case. We have seen it play out in real time, at podium after podium. This is the same sheriff who stood before cameras in early March and told NBC News that his investigators were, and this is a direct quote, definitely closer. That was his word, closer. This is also the same sheriff who, when asked whether he regretted letting the crime scene go too soon, told a local Tucson broadcaster that he had no regrets at all about any of it. But here is the harsh reality sitting behind those words. 65 days and counting, there is no named suspect, there is no arrest. A combined reward of $1.2 million has not been claimed, and according to a source with direct knowledge of the investigation who spoke to News Nation's Brian Enton, when asked whether there is a suspect in this case, the answer was plain. No direct suspect and no name on the table. That is not closer. That is a case that is fighting not to go cold. And then a woman named Cheryl McCollum decided to go see the situation for herself. McCollum is a crime and cold case investigator. She flew the Tucson, got out of the car, and walked into the Catalina foothills terrain where this investigation is unfolding. What she came back with was not a theory or an opinion. It was a ground-level account of what investigators are actually working against, and it was enough to make clear why this case is where it is. She described ground as hard as concrete, plants sharp enough to cut you, rattlesnakes, mountain lions, bobcats, and black bears across terrain that stretches so far and in so many directions that even experienced search teams cannot know what they have and have not covered. When she landed in Tucson, the temperature was already hitting 105 degrees. She said it gave her a whole new respect for what investigators are supposedly trying to accomplish out there. And she raised a point that cuts to the center of this case. In terrain like that, a suspect could pull up in a vehicle, dispose of evidence, and be back on the road in under 30 seconds without ever stepping out of the car. That is where the evidence in this case may be sitting right now. And as summer temperatures continue to climb, whatever has not yet been found is being degraded by heat, wind, and wildlife with every passing day. McCollum was equally clear about what technology can and cannot do here. No drone, no helicopter, no aerial scan is going to crack this open. What this case needs is boots on the ground, people who know how to read a desert landscape, who can spot a piece of clothing or a shoe or a shell casing before it becomes indistinguishable from the dirt around it. What McCollum saw in that desert is not just a picture of difficult terrain. It is a picture of what happens when the decisions made before she ever needed to go out there went wrong. And those decisions all trace back to one place. But before we get there, we have one quick ask. Before we get into the verified record of decisions made inside this investigation, we kindly request you subscribe to this channel. We are working toward hitting 1,000 subscribers before May 2026, and without your support, we simply cannot keep doing this work. So kindly subscribe right now. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to us. Now let's continue. McCollum's account of that terrain raises one unavoidable question. How did it get to a point where a private investigator had to fly out there herself to tell the country what was being missed? The answer starts the night Nancy disappeared, and the assumptions that shaped everything that followed was already forming. According to a source close to the investigation who spoke to News Nation, there was an immediate rush to judgment at that scene, the conclusion being that Nancy had wandered off. Based on that assumption, the first critical hours of this investigation were run as a search and rescue operation rather than a criminal abduction case. That framing, the source said, may have given whoever took Nancy the time they needed to cover their tracks completely. The unit that responded was not a tenured homicide squad. According to the same News Nation source, the homicide unit assigned to the case was staffed not by the most qualified investigators available, but individuals placed through personal connections rather than professional merit. The supervisor leading that unit, confirmed to have never investigated a homicide before being installed in that role, was the person standing inside Nancy Guthrie's home on the most important night of this case. Nanos had the option to hand the front of this operation to the FBI immediately. He did not. Retired NYPD Sergeant Joseph Giacalone said that with both Phoenix and Tucson within reach, Nanos could have called in experienced support at any point, and the choosing not to was a failure of leadership, not a defensible strategic decision.
Then the crime scene itself was compromised, and the account of how that happened is not in dispute because Nanos himself initially acknowledged it. The scene was cleared before the investigation was complete. Crime scene tape went back up days later as investigators returned to recover evidence they had missed. In the gap between those two decisions, reporters walked up to Nancy Guthrie's front door and photographed blood evidence on her porch. Former Pima County Sheriff and former U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Richard Carmona, a man with 30 years inside that department, confirmed that a Domino's pizza delivery driver crossed that scene while it was still active, and deputies on scene did not intervene. Carmona said Nanos made a fundamental error by personally announcing the reopening of the crime scene, describing it as a call that belongs to the lead detective, not the sheriff. He used one word to describe the result: corrupted. There is also the question of what resources were never brought to bear on this investigation at all. Certified volunteer search organizations with horses, ATVs, and all-terrain expertise, precisely the groups McCollum said should have been out there, were not incorporated into the official search in any meaningful way. Cadaver dog specialists said the decision to stop deploying human remains detection dogs by mid-March, after borrowing them briefly from Border Patrol in the early weeks, defied professional logic. Former Nassau County Police Lieutenant Michael Gould, who spent decades specializing in canine scent detection and human remains recovery, called it a critical misstep and said those dogs are recognized as scientific instruments in court proceedings. And then there is a man the internet has come to know as Exploring with Jim. While official search operations were scaling back, Jim was out in that desert every single day, live streaming his search from Tucson all the way toward the Mexican border, covering ground in snake boots that the official investigation left untouched. What he found is worth pausing on. During one of his live streams, Jim came across a pair of carpet shoes known as smuggler shoes, specifically designed to be worn over regular footwear so they leave no footprints in desert terrain. In a separate stream, he discovered what appeared to be a women's button-down shirt lying abandoned in the desert near the Guthrie home, consistent in description with nightwear. He left both items where he found them. Neither item was confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department as evidence, and as of today, Nanos has not publicly acknowledged Jim's work, referenced his findings, or made any known effort to partner with him or follow up on what he has uncovered. A private citizen, on his own initiative, has done what official search leadership apparently could not redirect resources to do. Jim went out there every single day on his own, and Nanos' office said nothing. No acknowledgement, no follow-up, no partnership with a man who was covering ground the official search had left open. And when you understand who Chris Nanos actually is, not the version he built his career on, but the one the public records have now confirmed, his silence on all of it starts to make a different kind of sense. Before Nanos came to Arizona, he worked for the El Paso Police Department in Texas. During that time, he was suspended 8 times in roughly 5 years. Those suspensions covered excessive force, including an incident in which someone ended up in the hospital, failure to report to duty, tardiness, off-duty gambling, insubordination, and the inappropriate discharge of a firearm. One suspension stretched across multiple weeks. He eventually left El Paso not voluntarily, but by resigning in lieu of termination, with insubordination and consistent inefficiency formally listed as the causes. On the resume he submitted to the Pima County Sheriff's Department, he listed his El Paso departure date as 1984. The actual year was 1982. The department called the discrepancy administrative and said it was not intended to mislead. For more than 40 years, none of the suspension history was disclosed, not to the department, not to the public, not to the voters who elected him. In December 2025, Nanos was placed under oath in a First Amendment lawsuit filed against him by one of his own deputies. When asked whether his past discipline had ever risen to the level of a suspension, he said no. The Pima County Board of Supervisors subsequently obtained public records confirming all 8 suspensions from El Paso. The board voted unanimously to invoke Arizona Statute ARS 11253, a territorial-era law compelling Nanos to appear before them and answer questions under sworn testimony. Their outside legal counsel was finalizing the language for that hearing request on April 7th. The board has simultaneously referred the perjury allegation to both the Arizona Attorney General and the United States Department of Justice. A separate independent workplace investigation by North Star Employment and Legal Solutions cleared Nanos of bullying allegations, but concluded that the preponderance of evidence supports a finding that he used his authority and department resources for political gain, specifically that he factored his political opponent's campaign into investigation and disciplinary decisions, and disclosed confidential information about her through a press release. The firm found his actions inconsistent with departmental policy, though as an elected official he is not formally subject to those policies.
The response from within the department has been unambiguous. All 306 deputies in the Pima County Deputies Organization voted no confidence in their sheriff. Not one voted confidence. Union President Aaron Cross told the Board of Supervisors that Nanos has lost the faith of his deputies and the community, and that his record makes him unfit to wear a badge. Cross said that if Nanos would not step down voluntarily, the board should force him out. The anonymous insider who spoke to Brian Enton was just as plain, describing morale within the department as the lowest they had ever seen and closing with a direct message to Nanos: the department is savable, but only if he steps aside. Gia Colon put what all of this pressure costs in terms that are hard to argue with. When a sheriff is operating under this level of institutional scrutiny, the damage does not stay at the top. Detectives stop trusting their instincts and start waiting to be told what to do. In an investigation where every passing day narrows the window for answers, that is a cost that cannot be recovered. Those are the unrecoverable costs Gia Colon warned about, and they are precisely what the Guthrie family has been living with for 65 days and counting, while the man responsible for finding Nancy has spent a significant portion of those days defending himself. On April 6, 2026, Savannah Guthrie walked back into Studio 1A for the first time since January 30th. She said she does not know if she belongs there anymore. She came back anyway because she said it is part of her purpose right now. Behind her, the task force working this case still has approximately 20 to 24 people, county detectives and FBI agents, whose only job is to find Nancy Guthrie. DNA recovered from the scene is being processed at 2 separate private labs. Genetic genealogy remains a possible forward path, the same method that ultimately identified Brian Kohberger in the Idaho murders. There are also 2 dates that Nanos did not reveal until late March, weeks after investigators apparently identified them as significant. He disclosed on March 24th that investigators believe something occurred on January 11th, and that January 24th is also a date of interest, both connected to the FBI's analysis of digital equipment at the scene. The masked figure captured on the doorbell camera the night Nancy disappeared had also appeared at her door on January 11th, 3 weeks before she vanished. What happened across those dates and why the public waited weeks to learn about them remain questions the sheriff's office has not fully answered. What the investigation does not have is a suspect, no name on the table. The sworn testimony hearing compelling Nanos to answer questions under oath is being drafted this week. The DOJ and the Arizona Attorney General are sitting on formal referrals. A recall petition is moving that could trigger a special election. His deputies have spoken. His department's independent review has spoken. The Board of Supervisors has spoken unanimously. None of that is the same as finding Nancy Guthrie, but all of it explains why this case is where it is, 65 days and counting, and why the question this video has been asking from the very beginning still does not have a comfortable answer. This channel will be back on this case. When something breaks, and something will, we will be here covering it with the same standard we brought to this video. If you are not subscribed, do it now so you do not miss it. And before you go, we want your honest take in the comments. Do you personally believe Sheriff Nanos should be removed from this investigation entirely? And if he were pulled off tomorrow, who do you think should step in to lead the search for Nancy Guthrie? Drop your answer below. This community has paid more attention to this case than most official voices have. Your perspective belongs in this conversation. Like and share this video to someone out there so they too can get the latest update on Nancy Guthrie's case.